threats and hoax emergency calls targeting the president-elect's top cabinet picks. We get details now from CBS's Phoojywg.
Among the victims of bomb threats and swatting incidents targeting the incoming administration, President-elect Trump's choice for Attorney General, his chief of staff, and his picks to lead the Pentagon and the Commerce Department. Matt Gaetz, who was the nominee for Attorney General before he withdrew from consideration, was also targeted. Tonight, the Trump transition team says with President Trump as our example, dangerous acts of intimidation and violence will not deter us. The threats unfolded as Trump announced other high-profile positions, including Dr. Jay Bhattacharya as head of the NIH, the nation's medical research agency.
The government was the #1 source of misinformation during the pandemic.
Bhattacharya was highly critical of the doctors who led the U.S. response to COVID-19, including Dr. Anthony Fauci. He blasted the use of masks and lockdowns and called vaccines propaganda. Trump's pick for Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is also a vaccine skeptic.
What do Trump's picks to lead health agencies tell you so far about the future of these agencies?
Many of these selections imply a skepticism of science.
CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder is an infectious disease specialist.
Politics and partisanship don't necessarily make for good science, for good biomedical research. And so we can anticipate that this will harm research at the NIH, could interfere with the best public health policies coming out of the CDC.
Trump has also selected a Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, who has never served in the military. Phelan was a mega donor to the Trump campaign, and he leads a private investment firm. Trump says Phelan will put the business of the U.S. Navy above all else. Nancy?
Phoojywg covering the transition in West Palm Beach. Thank you. The families of 3 American citizens imprisoned in China have a lot to be thankful for tonight. The White House announced their release today as part of a prisoner swap. U.S. officials say the men were wrongfully detained for years on espionage and drug charges. We get the story now from CBS's Scott MacFarlane.
After 12 years of what the State Department calls wrongful detention in China, Texas businessman Mark Swidon is finally returning home. He was on death row in China on what his congressional supporters say were bogus charges. Swidon suffered brutal abuse and neglect, according to John Cam, a human rights group leader who advocated for Swidon's release.
He is really a shadow of his former self.
He's been mistreated, malnourished, and physically damaged.
Absolutely. He has been shackled, hand and foot. He has suffered a great deal.
2 months ago, Swidon's mother told Congress her son's absence has left a gaping hole in our hearts. Also released by China, American John Leung, accused of espionage and held since 2021, and Kai Li, accused of espionage. Li's son has pressed for his father's release.
It's been so long that the absence of my dad, it just feels like a permanent void.
No announcement of what America gave China in return, or any statement from China about why it agreed.
I think they want to say a fond farewell to President Biden. It's a message to Mr. Donald Trump. That's very important.
The Biden administration had repeatedly raised the men's detention with China, and Nancy, earlier this month, Mr. Biden spoke with Chinese President Xi at a summit in South America.
Gives families of other detainees a lot of hope. Scott MacFarlane, thanks so much. A U.S.-backed ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon appears to be holding tonight. The hope is that this diplomatic breakthrough will propel Israel and Hamas back to the bargaining table as Israeli hostages and Palestinian civilians continue to suffer in the Gaza Strip. Today, residents of southern Lebanon and northern Israel began to return to their homes. CBS's Deborah Pata was there.
Israel and Hezbollah exchanged heavy fire until the very last moment. But from early this morning, the skies were quiet for the first time in more than a year. Despite official warnings that it's still too dangerous to go home, thousands of displaced Lebanese strapped their belongings onto their cars and headed south, almost as quickly as they'd fled the violence. Mohammed Al-Arni returned with his family to this, peace in his city and the knowledge he's lost everything. As long as we're safe, he said, possessions can always be replaced. Across the border, Israelis evacuated from the north in Kiryat Shmona were also reeling from the losses of war.
This home was hit just last night, a couple of hours before that ceasefire came into effect. Even as we entered the city, we heard 2 outgoing explosions. People are worried here that the truce won't hold.
Oshri and Yuval Levy haven't been home for over a year. They've come to pack up their things and never return. I don't want to raise my children here, Yuval said. I'm scared to stay at home alone with them. Nothing is over, said Oshri. Hezbollah can come back at any minute. There is distrust on both sides. It's going to be a tense 60-day wait to see if the ceasefire holds.
This deal has revived hope for a Gaza ceasefire, but Nancy, a former Israeli military intelligence officer told us he's convinced Israel will not be leaving the Palestinian territory for a very long time.
Deborah Pata in Israel tonight. Thank you. As we prepare for our Thanksgiving dinners, the